Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of my podcast, Dr. T, the Gamer and Film PhD. Joining me today is my good friend and book lover, Matt Root, owner and operator of Matt's Book a Day, a book review Instagram account, and Matt's Books and Music, a blog dedicated to, you guessed it, books and music. Everyone, give Matt a round of applause. You're not going to give yourself a round of applause, Matt? This is what I do now. This is my thing. I don't have an audience, so this is.
I guess I can join in if it's not.
Let's do it together, friend.
If it's appropriate. Yay!
Yeah, we did it. So Matt, thank you so much for joining me here today. As a bit of background, just so everyone knows, Matt and I have known each other for several years now, so we're not strangers to each other. And the thing that Matt and I love to do is we like to grab a few pints at one of our favorite local haunts. One of them being the Rebel House on
Rebel
Yonge
House.
Street, and the other one is not Punch and Judy. That's in London. What's the other place?
Bishop and Belcher.
Bishop and Belcher, they all just sound the same. Also, just off of Bloor, and at our local haunts, and we just like to get into debates about all sorts of things. And I figured, well, why deny the world this like exquisite piece of entertainment that happens? So, Matt, again, thank you so much for joining me here today as my second guest.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, Matt, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself before we start diving into it?
Sounds good. So yeah, my name is Matt. I am a project coordinator in public sector here in Toronto. I've lived all over the country, but have been in Toronto for 13 years almost. So I guess I can call it home now. And yeah, I am a total nerd, especially around books and music. Um,
You don't
I
say.
Yeah, I don't say. So yeah, in addition to this Bookstagram account, I do, as Angelo said, have a blog. Well, actually, two blogs. So the first is about books and music, which I've been keeping for 3 or 4 years now, and I have another dedicated blog to issues of faith and spirituality that I've been keeping for 8 years now, which I guess makes me very much a millennial since I'm still blogging and nobody else is. But here we are.
Oh, that's right. And look at that. I keep on forgetting that because of your sort of background in almost like theology, right?
Yeah.
You know quite a bit about Greece, Greek culture, the Orthodox religion. You're probably the only other person, actually more so than most Greek people. I love getting my random Greek messages from you about, Kalomina and my Kalopascha. It brings me, and it's in Greek as well. So I absolutely love it. And I know that I'm no longer a flight attendant, but I am going to get you to Thessaloniki at some point because I know that that's a very special place to you.
It is, yeah, for sure.
You run a book review account on Instagram. That I will admit that's the account that I'm most familiar with. I know that you have your blog as well, where you do books and music. But how did you start doing book reviews, and what compelled you to open up an Instagram account? And also, sorry to throw so many questions at you, but like how, like it's called Matt's Book a Day. Like how the hell you read so many books and you manage to literally do like a book review a day? Like, please enlighten us.
Okay, well, I'll try to take those one by one.
Yes,
So
please.
the book reviewing sort of evolved over time pretty naturally. As I said, typical millennial started blogging on a live journal in 2005
Hmm.
back in the day. So I think I sort of trained myself to not only like think through and engage with the things that I enjoy, but also to like tell people all about it, whether they want to know or not. And so blogging sort of comes naturally to me. I've always been a huge reader. But around 2015, 2016, that became a bigger part of my life. And so then a few years ago, those two things just sort of naturally came together. And I started the book blog first, and then yeah, not wanting to be a total dinosaur, I decided to do the Instagram account because it seemed a lower barrier to access and potentially at the time less evil than TikTok. I've been doing that for the last 3 years now as well. That's a heavy lift, and to be honest, I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to sustain that. But
Are
how
you
do I
running out
do
of
it?
books?
No, it's reading that much. I mean, the long answer is that 2016, 2017, I was very busy and I sort of burned out. And so I just sort of like cocooned in my apartment for 2018, 2019, doing really nothing but reading. And then I
Oh
was like,
wow, like you burnt out and for 2 years.
yes, yes,
Okay.
I am an introvert.
And then
And
COVID hit,
so
so
Oh yeah, no. And so 2020, I'm gonna jump into the world watching
Today's it. I'm going to
Today's my
Thessaloniki. I'm
day.
traveling.
Oh yeah, I was gonna do all of the travel. I was gonna do all
All
these
the
different
things.
events and get there and
You were
network
ready.
and get myself out there. And yeah, of course. I also work in public health, so it was sort of a double whammy of being in an incredibly intense period at work, and then also, the world shutting down, and work taking over the world for 3 years, which was not
Yeah.
fun in a lot of different reasons. But
Obviously, right now, the literary moment, the film moment, the game moment. To some people, like the cult slash spirituality moment is Heated Rivalry. And of course, we have talked about that, and I want to talk to you about that. But before we get into that, I want to know, what are some of your favorite books? Like, what are some books that really like left an impression on you? I'm curious, like, what's on your bookshelf over there?
yeah, I mean, I think probably not surprising because of my interest and background. A lot of the books that I love involve people, especially queer people, wrestling with issues of faith and spirituality, and just those kind of conversations in general. The number three book of my all time for me is Pride and Prejudice, which a lot of people say was sort of like
Really?
the first romance in a kind of in the contemporary sense of what we mean by that. And certainly, spawned basically the entire world of Regency romance, which is like, massive. Um, and it's just a delightful story. It was lower down on my list a few years ago, and I realized I reread this like every other year, and I have for like 25 years, and I love it every single time, and it never gets old. And it's like, why? It has to be one of my favorite books.
Okay, Pride and Prejudice. So tell me a book that you just really didn't like.
In terms of books that people would know about, like I really, really hated Wuthering Heights. I don't think
Okay.
there's I don't think it's other than being atmospheric. I don't think it has anything going for it at all. The characters are horrible. The
Okay.
plot's horrible.
Did you watch
Yeah,
any of the adaptations?
I have not seen any adaptations because I'm
Okay.
not going to do that to myself. Um,
I'm not gonna
but
torture myself.
like I hate the book to start with, but
Right.
also I wouldn't call myself like a highly sensitive person. However, I am very sensitive to atmospherics, especially in TV and movies.
Okay.
And so that when there is like a very atmospheric, spooky, creepy sort of vibe, like I will carry that in my body for like days afterwards. So
Really?
when I know I don't like the IP, and I know that it's going to have a creepy vibe that's going to like make me feel very deeply disturbed for a while. Like, why would I do that to myself?
So are you more literary in your scope?
There's nothing that I won't read or really don't read. I certainly do read more in things that I enjoy, but I will read horror. Always on the lookout for like a good one. I find thrillers to be really boring, ironically. And
Oh,
so
how dare you?
that doesn't really like I don't read a lot of those. It takes a lot for them to actually be interesting and thrilling to me. Um, but other than that, I read science fiction, I read fantasy, I read romance, I read middle grade, I read YA, I read.
You
I
read
try
it
to
all.
read
Okay.
all of the prize big prize list nominees and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, definitely no like book snobbery here. Like books are lovely, and they're all fun
But
little friends to make. So
let's move now into a conversation about not necessarily what we came here to talk about, but about something that, I mean, we've talked about quite a bit, and I have been talking about nonstop, and I really need to like get myself checked like mentally, because it's become consuming, and I need to slowly like regain my footing as an individual rather than as part of like a collective loon cult. How many sort of romance books have you read in the past, like in terms of like the genre? Like, how familiar are you with the genre? And like, when did you first get introduced to Heated Rivalry? Because you knew about Heated Rivalry far before I did, because you had read the books before the show came out. But how did you discover that series, and how familiar are you with the romance genre?
yeah, so I mean, I have a difficult journey with the Game Changer series, to be honest. So I read Game Changer sometime during the pandemic, and I really did enjoy it a lot.
Oh,
But
okay, that's fine.
um, more for the emotional story. I think that it deals with the loneliness of being in the closet better than pretty much any book that I had come across at that point, at least. And I think
Really?
I do think the adaptation did a really good job of showing that, even if in just that one scene where they're celebrating winning the cup, and it just sort of pans out to all of Scott's colleagues that he's sacrificed so much for, celebrating with their family, and he's just standing there alone like that. That's just a small snippet of what I feel like the book did really effectively. But then I quickly started Heated Rivalry after that, and to be honest, I actually didn't finish it. I abandoned it. I thought it was kind of awful. Um, and so, there are, yes, I'm
Hold
just a
on,
little
hold
shady.
on. That is a 3-fan dismissal. That's not a salute. That is a dismissal. Oh, the audacity. You know what? That's actually a 4.
Or,
I'm gonna have to do the rest of the interview behind Mr. Fanny. He has to protect me. He has to protect me from what you just said. I don't know. I just okay. I probably
are you
shouldn't be
done?
shaming my guests because this is about are you done? I listen, listen, I am Greek, okay? And I need to be dramatic. So okay, so Game Changer, the first book you enjoyed, Heated Rivalry, the sequel, you thought was garbage, and you just couldn't finish it.
It just wasn't for me. And
Nice
so,
save.
I will admit that I was quite surprised when I found out that of all of the gay romance or romance series that were out there, and of all the hockey romance series that are there, this was the one that was being adapted. Now, having seen the show, revisiting Heated Rivalry and devouring the rest of the series like everybody else, I get it now. One thing that Rachel Reid was always really good at was developing compelling characters and writing really good, snappy, witty, heartfelt dialogue. And so I totally
Yes.
understand why Jacob Tierney, as like a TV and movies guy, would have really been attracted to and latched on to this series and what it was doing. And of course, we all know now, like the story of Heated Rivalry evolves a lot from those first chapters, where it's just these like two teenagers who hate each other. Fucking, it's for me at least that was not compelling reading. So I will say that yeah, I get why the series is good on for especially the dialogue and for TV adaptation. And I will also say that I think like with every book, Rachel Reid really grew into her craft. And she's the first to admit that she just like started it as something to have a creative outlet. When she was raising her kids and stuff. She has learned on the job in a lot of ways, and I think has become an excellent crafter of stories now. To the fact that I think like the her recent 3 or 4 books are excellent books as books, not just as like fun romances.
Yeah, the long game is phenomenal, and you can definitely see the growth, right? Like that's very understandable, and it's true, right? Like no matter what you do, work is work, right? And you're always going to get better at your job as you practice, as you take feedback, as you take criticism. You learn on the job, and you get better at the job, and you can see the growth from Game Changer to the long game, and I'm curious to see what Unrivaled is going to
Yeah.
look like. So Rachel clearly likes having the hockey rink and the hockey arena as like her main setting, her main stage.
In interviews, she keeps on saying that she wants to move beyond it, but she never does. And so, we're in this like lovely space now where romance is sort of everywhere. But like, it's really only been the last like I would say 10 years or so that like it's really been a thing. And even when you get to like books that are technically speaking about relationships between men are kind of framed as love stories, even like the beginning of the 2010s, they still are tend to be pretty like sad and depressing. There's not a lot of joy there, and so there was this tendency for a long time for queer stories to center queer suffering instead of queer joy. And I think that's just like the complete opposite of what romance is all about as a genre.
Right.
And so famously, romance has been written by and for women. And as often as men have complained about, oh, romance is an unrealistic, blah blah blah, setting like false expectations. The women who write romance and who read romance understand that it's fantasy. They understand that they are willing into existence the kinds of men and the kind of relationships that they want to see in the world. It's a very
Right.
intentional thing that the genre does, centering joy and happiness, and it's this like idea of a happy ending as resistance. And I think a lot of queer media, especially queer media by men, certainly when people of our generation were coming up, we're still, all the stories were about, being ostracized from your family, about watching your loved one die of AIDS, about, seeing someone you care about
Right.
being beaten to a bloody pulp in the streets, and knowing that the police weren't going to do anything about it. Like, those are the kinds of gay stories that we grew up on. And those are important stories to tell, and they continue to be relevant. But I think this idea that romance has, that a happy ending can be an act of resistance, is really, really powerful. And this is probably going to be controversial, but like, I think it's something that the queer community sort of had to learn from women who have been, again, trying to manifest these relationships and men into the world. And I think it's really, really like powerful. And getting back to another thing that you mentioned, like in the bookish world, we often talk about like romance plus, and like the plus part is the kind of bigger social commentary that the author wants to talk about. But the romance being such a structured, trope driven genre, that, guarantees canonically that you're going to have a happy ending, it provides a safe space to have really hard conversations. And I think that's something that good romance does really, really well. I think it's a really, really smart thing. And so you have, you're reading good, like, MF romance. They're talking about, women's struggles with caregiving. They're talking about academic theft by men, about, all these like really like heavy issues that are of great relevance, but in a safe space where you know that you're going to get a happy ending at the end. And I think because romance is by its nature kind of unconventional and a little bit subversive, that it really allows women to play pretty effectively and powerfully with ideas of masculinity and patriarchy. So when you think about Game Changer, like, yes, it's talking about homophobia, and yes, it's talking about the closet, but it's also talking about, like in later books, you have sort of like the pack mentality of being part of a team. You have toxic masculinity and its impacts on men and women. You have men's mental health journeys are a big part of later in the series. These are really big issues that are kind of fundamental to. Oh, I mean, there's also in the book 3 is about gender and gender expression, the performance of gender. These are really big and interesting topics. And again, I think that romance is a really interesting place to play with those, and I think it makes total sense why women have been among like the leaders, the vanguard into that world. I said there are important questions of like appropriation of voice and all that kind of thing that we can have those conversations, but I think it's really cool and really special that this has been a place where women have explored.
You're absolutely right, and there's a lot in there, and I wanted to like start jotting down notes for things that I wanted to say. Um, so a couple of things. I think one of the things that has regained interest is, and this is I think maybe the difference, and maybe I don't know if you're how familiar you are with this, but the fujoshi effect that I think that in a lot of especially in Japan, but a lot of like East Asian cultures, I think like and yao I think it's yaoi, yaoi. There's a much longer history of like BL or boy love or male romance stories that are by women and for women. I think that that's something that has existed for significantly longer. I mean, I think we've only really seen this sort of like become popular in the West quite recently, but I know that in East Asian society and cultures, it's been around for quite some time now, and sort of like the BL phenomenon, which has a name in English that I hate, boy love. It just I don't know, it just does not sound right. But I mean, it has nothing to
Yeah.
do with the
Yes.
thing that you would think it's the what I'm trying to say. So I think that's really interesting. And again, what Heated Rivalry I think has opened up a really important space to have conversations about things like consumption, who consumes things, how, and I don't want to say ownership, but I think that one of the things that has come about with Heated Rivalry is a bit of a tension about who owns something, right? Who's
Sure.
something for, who owns something. And I think it's a complex space because gay men and straight women have a very long history, a very long bond. Even in the show, again, I just did my reaction video for episode 5 where Shane comes out. To Rose and like Svetlana sort of acknowledges to Ilya that that she knows that Jane is a boy, is a he. And I talked about how I think the main theme in that episode was the way in which women have helped and supported, in particular, gay and queer men through their journeys, creating safe spaces to come out, to be friends. I mean, back in the day, there's the less I mean, I guess it's not entirely, PC way of saying it, but like the and the hag, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
or like a fag hag, which I know, like, maybe more Gen X and maybe like older millennials such as ourselves, which I don't think maybe the younger generation would love so
yeah.
much.
We
Um,
inherited that language more than we've used it, I would say, as a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
millennials. Yeah,
I found myself, it's funny, generationally, I found myself again somewhere in between like the boomer Gen X sort of culture that was created and like the younger millennial Gen Z. Like, I find as a Zennial, I'm kind of stuck in between. And like, anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But so, um, but the important role that women, as you said, have played in creating safe spaces for men, going out to gay bars with their gay friends, and of course culturally we share a lot. Even something like drag right now being this intersection of like makeup and hair, a lot of things that are ascribed to sort of women and women's culture sort of being for some shared, for others appropriated. Music, right? Like
yeah.
it's funny how, when you look at like musicians, it's Madonna, it's Kylie Minogue, it's all of these sort of like pop divas. So there's always these really interesting intersections and overlaps between sort of women's culture and gay men's culture. And I think Heated Rivalry has just added an extra layer and complexity.
I think we're in this moment where the narratives, people don't want don't want to allow the narratives to be complex, right? We want people to be 100% in the right or 100% in the wrong. And I don't think that's true to life, and I certainly don't think it's healthy for cultural engagement. I think we can acknowledge that some of these conversations are complicated. Even you mentioned in episode 5, which is my favorite episode of the show. But like,
Oh, it's not episode 3.
no, of course not. But I feel like, on the one hand, you can frame that as you did in terms of, these wonderful women coming alongside and creating safe spaces for their male friends. As a woman, you could come to that and be like, oh my God, once again, the woman having to do all the emotional labor for these idiot men in their lives, right? Like, both of those are true framings of those scenes, right? And I think they're both true experiences that people have in life.
Women oftentimes carry the burden of having to sort of hold patriarchy on their shoulders and enforcing heteronormativity. And so a lot of times those coming out scenes are usually a lot more difficult, or where the woman is obviously very angry, especially if she's in a relationship with a man. I thought, at least in that scene, it was interesting the way it played out. But you're definitely right. It's that there are a multitude of ways to look at a particular text. There isn't just one right or wrong way. And this is something, again, like I think quite a bit about, is that even though we live in a society that is supposed to be like liberal and tolerant, I think it becomes a conversation about the paradox of inclusivity, right? Like, what does it mean to actually be inclusive when your idea of inclusive means you have to think and be exactly like this, or else you're bad or evil? Like, this is part of the complexities of, and the diametrically opposed ideas of what it means to be inclusive and tolerant. Um, in a society that seems to be increasingly sort of more polarized politically, financially, in every single sort of respect, right? And you're right, when it comes to having conversations about art, in particular, you need to have a space where you can have disagreements without sort of condemning the other person, and recognizing that opinions and also observations can change over time as well.
Yeah, no, I just I do think it is important to sort of allow things to be complex, and that a story can be a good story without being everybody's story. A couple of years ago, there was a book that was pretty popular, but it took place in New York during the late '80s and the peak of the AIDS crisis, and
What was it
a
called?
lot of When You Call My Name, I think is what it was called. Yeah, it was based on the Madonna lyric. Anyways, a lot of people were really loving it, and then there was sort of this counter narrative developed that, oh well, it excludes, black voices, it excludes Latin American voices who like bore the brunt of the AIDS crisis and all this sort of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, those are really, really important stories, clearly. But it's also kind of realistic that maybe these two suburban white guys who find themselves in the village weren't hanging out with a lot of people of color in the late '80s. This can be a true story and a good story, a moving story, a beautiful story, without necessarily being the whole story and representative of everybody's story. As long as it's not claiming to be everybody's story, I think there can be kind of room for that. And again, as long as you are
No.
reading those black and brown stories as well, right?
So if you're basically a white guy from the suburbs and this is your experience, like, are you the best person to start authoring and bringing in voices of, people whose experience, you don't have any lived experience with? Like, remember when girls came out, and the first season was a really big hit, but then like they kind of really went after Lena Dunham and the show
Yeah.
because it was about like privileged white girls, and just like, well, she's a privileged white girl, and then they tried so hard to like bring in all of these different characters, and it just didn't work, and they just started really messing with the show, unfortunately. And it's just like, this show is about these four characters told
Yeah.
by this woman and her lived experience. I watched Issa Rae's Insecure. Like, I'm not a black woman who lives in Los Angeles, but that show was brilliant and I loved it, and I could identify with so many of the stories as someone who was raised by like a single mother, didn't come from privilege. So I feel like sometimes what we lose is that just because you don't see yourself represented or reflected as a mirror image on the screen or in the text doesn't mean that you can't come to identify with the character, their stories, their experiences, and their struggles. And queer people for the longest time have had to come to identify themselves and pull culture together from the straight world, right? Like, look at something like drag. Queer people have been primed to sort of look at things and in places where they don't exist, and then take it and make it their own through that process of appropriation and identification. And I feel like a little bit of that has been lost now. Of course, not to say that you don't want like diversity and inclusion on screen. And of course, I think some shows do it really well if the show is set up for that, like an ensemble show. But you're right. I don't think that something is necessarily invalidated just because it tells a certain story from a certain perspective, right? Like, you can't tell every story in every single piece of literature. That's what the next book is for. This book is focusing on this.
Exactly.
The next one is going to focus it on that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I also say that, in the bookish world, sometimes we talk about window books versus mirror books. There are books that are like windows where you're looking out on a scene that you're not a part of. There are also
Okay.
books that are like are mirrors, that are kind of reflecting yourself back to you, in which you feel seen and understood. And
Right.
the best books do both at the same time, right? There's a particularity
Mm-hmm.
that's not yours normally, that helps you learn and understand another perspective. But there's something also that touches on the universal, and that you also see yourself reflected back in the same way. And so there's sort of like, yeah, the mirror book, the window book, but then also kind of like the best books, which kind of do both at the same time. I made the brave decision on my recent trip home to watch Heated Rivalry with my mom, and which was actually a lovely experience. Um, but
What did you think of Ilya's ass?
um, I mean, she
Was
for
she
the most
like,
part, she just thought he was an ass, and it really wasn't until like halfway through episode 5 that she started to, oh, I guess he's okay. She really did not resonate with his spicy personality.
really?
She did not comment on the ass.
Yeah. So she didn't identify with his version of spice.
No, for me, watching the show, in a lot of ways, it really is a mirror book, like or a mirror story. I see myself and my experiences. I mean, not a hockey player by any imagination, but still, those experiences of
You're
being
hooking
in the
up with
closet,
people in hotel rooms.
the experience of not really seeing like positive outcomes and possibilities for your life, pushing joy into the distant future until like certain criteria are met or whatever, right? Like, these are things that are very much resonant with my own life in a lot of ways. For my mom, it's entirely a window story, right? She there's very little for her to relate to in that, but it helps her to understand queer experiences. It helps her to understand my experiences. It
Did
opens up
she
important
question you?
conversations.
Like, was that a
Um,
part of it? Like, was she asking you, like, oh, is this what it's like? Was this the same for you, et cetera, et cetera?
she was more pensive than actively inquisitive about the experience. But she did say she appreciated. Early in my visit, she started asking me questions about it, and I said, okay, like, if you're curious about this, like, I have the subscription, like, let's turn it on, and I'll tell you when you might want to avert your eyes.
I should watch it with my Greek mother.
I mean, that's definitely a live stream for the Patreon, right?
I mean, very much so. Greek woman with no filter watches Heated Rivalry. Watch. Warning, you will be offended.
Anyways, this is a really interesting experience to see the show through my mom's eyes, in a sense, too, as someone who hasn't had a lot of those same experiences. And this is why
She hasn't had a lot of gay experiences.
this is why books and movies and TV shows are so important, right? For developing empathy, and it's why it's really hard to find a closed-minded and bigoted bookish person.
That's true.
Because as bookish people, like we want stories, we want different stories. We don't want to hear, we don't want to read the same book over and over and over again for the most part. And so, yeah, most bookish people are there to be, for that window book experience.
Um, so in terms of Game Changer and the Heated Rivalry universe, you said that episode 5 was your favorite episode, but I know that you're also a fan of Scott and Kip's episode. I guess in part because Game Changer, the book, is is it still your favorite, or is it just the one that holds
It's
like
a,
the
yeah,
closest to your heart?
yeah, I think it's one that's probably closest to my heart,
Right.
more than it's my
It's
favorite.
a super spicy book, and I'm still angry that I when I first watched, because again I watched the show first before I read the books, and then after I read the books and I went back to start doing like reaction videos and analysis videos and all that, I ended up liking episode 3 a lot more than I did the first time I saw it, especially after I read the book. But like the book was nasty. Like, girl, like that one scene where like Scott is in like the meeting room at the hotel and Kip is taking out sex toys and using them on himself, and I'm like, we were denied this? What happened? I mean, I get it. They only had 40 minutes to tell this story, and I
Yeah.
think that Jacob Tierney obviously did a very good job within 40 minutes. Although I still don't get the serial killer edition. Like that wasn't in the book, and I don't quite understand. Like, what are your thoughts on that? You're quite literary. You tell me what you think that serial killer convo is all about.
And I had not really like actually even clocked that conversation, but the when I was watching with my mom, I was like, okay, like, I need to pay attention to this serial killer versus spree killer conversation. My best guess is that it's just really to show how intense Scott is,
And
and
how
how
awkward.
I think it's just more like I think he sees himself a little bit in these like super intense people, even if it's obviously manifesting in a very different way and a much healthier way, we'll say. Um, but I think it is just that he is an intense human being and recognizes, like, oh, like, there but by the grace of God go I, sort of, sort of.
I mean, but is it like a metaphor for like toxic masculinity? Because again, it's also like the serial killer is also a figure of mass media, right? Like the rise of the serial killer is correspondent to the rise of mass media popularity. People wanting to be seen, be visible, feeling like they are invisible, because all serial killers, in theory, all want to get caught, right? They do these grisly things, but eventually they purposely make mistakes to end up getting caught, because if you don't get caught, how are people going to know, and how are you going to be famous? The serial killer is also a figure of like the collector and the consumer, right?
Right.
So like the most famous one who's gay, there was obviously a TV show with Jeffrey Dahmer, like he actually consumed his victims' bodies. A lot of him people keep like trophies. So I mean, I was just like, because again, with 40 minutes to tell a story, and a very and so much from the book was caught out. And again, one of the biggest critiques that I would give, and I think a lot of people have, is that it seemed like Scott and Kip got together like overnight, like like lesbians, like basically like the U-Haul was like in the rearview mirror the entire time. And I'm like, out of all the things to sort of spend time on, it was this. It seemed very odd. And as you know, only a couple of days ago I was standing right next to Jacob Tierney, and I was too chicken to tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, I'm a big fan, and come talk to me on my podcast, because that's one question that I would love to ask him. And I'm still kind of sad that I was too chicken to actually do it. Like literally right next to me, crossing the street, and I didn't say anything, and I'm mad at myself for that.
I do think that episode 3, just to defend it overall, is that I think it was really smart to place it at the kind of the half point of the season. And I think the reason why it hit so differently is that it really put Shane and Ilya's dynamic kind of in relief, sort of like, wow, my brain just went to apophatic anthropology, which is probably not the direction we want to go to on this
Why
podcast
not?
for YouTube. But anyways, it's showing kind of what this relationship like could be if they would just like Scott is very self-aware. He's like, these are my needs. I understand that this might not be enough, but would you be willing to try? Right. Again, thinking about this coming from the voice and mind of a woman. It's like, I want a man who knows what he wants and can tell me what he wants. As gay men, I think we can also appreciate that that even as we know we're part of the problem. Um,
We make our own mess.
we've all been there, but no, like I think it's a really beautiful thing, right? When everything at that to that point, with Ilya and Shane is always, okay, I've got to go, okay, I've got to go, right? Where he's like, stay. this is what I want, this is what I need. So I think like it's the relief. This is what a healthy dynamic might look like between two men, and even like Kip walking away in the end. Like it's like, okay, yeah, we gave this the old college try. I love you. There's so much that is wonderful about this, but ultimately the sacrifices are too much. I can't have you and not have my dad in my life. It's hard, it sucks, but that is the emotionally mature, psychologically mature response, right? To have that there to contrast. So then when you see in the next episode Ilya say, stay, it means so much more.
It does, and then Shane kind of freaks out and leaves, which is similar to what Kip does, but obviously for very different reasons. No, that's actually a very, very good point. And again, like I think when I first watched it, it didn't make any sense. I'm like, why are we cutting away? Although again, with Jacob Tierney and this idea of like yearning, it does kind of make sense because it's just like, no, like we're not going to follow this storyline. Now we're going to follow a completely different storyline. It's funny just because you said something that was really interesting about it being a reflection of like a healthy relationship. And I think the way that you outlined it makes a lot of sense because I think for some people, it could on the surface appear very unhealthy where all of a sudden, and again, I think this is the difference between the book and the TV show, where in the book, I think the relationship took place over 2 to 3 months or so, right? So the courting process was a lot more prolonged, whereas in the TV show, for brevity's sake, it seemed like they basically, like I said, like moved in together like overnight. So in the show, it did feel a bit more of like rich daddy kind of comes in and saves, the poor grad student from his working class job, but possesses him, puts him in isolation in like the princess tower, the tuxedo being in the closet at the end, literally like a metaphor for the closet itself. Although I think it might also be a reference to Brokeback Mountain, because if you remember at the very end, Jack Twist's outfit was hanging in a closet that Ines Del Mar looked at before the movie ended. But like in the show, I think because they didn't have the time to fully explicate the storyline, it appeared almost less healthy. Whereas through the lens that you explained it through, and again, maybe something that became a bit more evident in the book is that it could have been, despite all of these social sort of challenges, a bit more of a vision of what it means to sort of be healthy, of being able to communicate your want, your needs, except the whole serial killer conversation thing, which kind of maybe undermines that a little bit. And then knowing when to leave because, you just can't any
Yeah.
further.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they get together pretty quickly in the book as well. But I mean, I guess one thing that I don't think the adaptation talked about at all was that one of Kip's primary hangups was the fact that he didn't want to be a kept man, and that he that the financial discrepancy was a huge
Yes.
part of what wasn't working for him, and again, time constraints and that kind of thing, that wasn't what they chose to focus on. That a very big part of that dynamic, and they did show his like working class, his like working really really hard, his hustle, so to speak, to follow his very not working class dreams. They did a good job of showing that, but not the concern around money that was very much part of his story in the book.
You're absolutely right. And as someone who again doesn't come from like a privileged background, and not that I have any sugar daddies like rushing to like knock down my door to like pay for my things and keep me. I understand very well that sense of wanting your independence, a sense of like pride that comes in being able to sort of like provide for yourself, pay for yourself. Again, that one part where they got into a really big fight in the book where he offered to pay like for his like tuition, and he's like, no, like I don't need your money. Like you're right. And again, there is still like an ongoing conversation about having like a 4-part mini series that focuses on their story, and I hope that they actually do that, because you're right. I actually I did enjoy the book, and I think that the characters themselves I enjoyed as well, and they deserve to have like a bit more time to have that story told, because again, I think all the books offer a view of sort of home, because the one thing they talked about with like again this idea of queer joy is like, oh, homophobia, I just don't believe that when they kiss at the end like everyone's going to be celebrating. It's just like homophobia can exist in, like, for example, like we live in Toronto, very sort of like a queer friendly city. I don't experience necessarily like homophobia on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an overarching sense of like homophobia and like heteronormative patriarchy that we sort of exist in and feel in a multitude of ways in different contexts. And I think that's what the world of like hockey offers, is that context of homophobia that literally like creates a bit of a prison for these men where they can't come out and they can't live their lives. And this is what sort of like motivates their relationships, whether it's, you know, only being able to sort of like have fun in the privacy of like hotel rooms when it's convenient.
Yeah.
Again, like in episode 2, I think it was like Shane telling Ilya to like come to like the back alley,
Yeah.
even though he owns the entire freaking building. You know, Kip basically having to be, you know, kept, you know, not being able to actually go out to dinner, or do anything because he has to, like, everything has to be done within the private sphere. There's a really interesting dynamic here between public and private, and the way in which public and private spaces operate for queer
Mhm.
people. Even someone like Kip, who like can't host, right? He lives at home with his parents and he has
Yeah.
to travel, to use like gay terminology.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot there that is worthy of unpacking. That, you know, can't always, because again, even if you're not, you know, even when you have like a particular scope, even from within that particular scope, there's only so much that you can focus on as well. And every episode has its time limit. But just because it's not a focus doesn't mean that it isn't part of the conversation. It can be implied rather than, you know, explicit.
Yeah, and again, this, the whole thing with, you know, hockey culture specifically is such the, you know, such the there's no I in team sort of mentality is so strong, and that's a really really like wonderful thing about hockey culture. It's also a pretty dark thing about hockey culture when people do bad
Well,
things.
and Role Model
Um,
really kind of
oh,
outlines
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, 1,000%. So I know we'll be seeing a lot of that in season 2 and possibly season 3 as they develop kind of those two stories. Um, but you know, it's a really, you know, again, this was one conversation I had with my mom. You know, it's sort of like with that kind of pack mentality, the thing about being different is that, you know, if a straight, you know, if Hayden was filmed holding his wife's hand as he walked down the street, that would be no big deal, right? But if Shane were to be seen walking down the street holding a man's hand, that would be, you're making it all about yourself. How dare you take focus off the team? You know, like that's,
Right.
even if the attacks aren't homophobic, those are where the attacks would absolutely 100% come from within hockey culture, because you just, again, you do not take attention or put attention on yourself. You don't take the focus away from the team. You don't want to be a distraction, right? By definition, as a gay man, if you are, you know, out in public with another man, you are being a distraction because you are being a story.
Well, and even right now, like it's Pride Month, and you're seeing, you know, is it the Beaverton that had that really funny article that came out like 2 days ago? It's just like, hockey is celebrating Pride Month by shutting down the comment section again.
It was the
Um,
Jays actually, so not even as bad as hockey, but
oh, it was the Jays. Well, but I
yeah.
mean, it's true, right? Because the way, and it's something that I guess I never thought about, but, and I should have, as someone who used to be a flight attendant and wore like a uniform. I remember when we were in training, especially from younger people, there was a lot of resistance around like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Or like, and I tried to say to people, like, uniform, right? Uniform. Everyone is supposed to look and be the same. When you wear a uniform, this is not an opportunity to be a unique and expressive, dynamic individual, right? If you want that, you create a podcast or a YouTube channel like I did, honey. You don't wear a uniform to be unique and different. You are meant to be the exact same as everybody else. And I never thought about that in the world of hockey, which sounds probably really stupid, but you're right. Simply being gay and simply not even trying to call attention to yourself, because you are the other, you are the automatic standout. And then even if
Yeah.
you don't want it to be all about you, people will interpret it, or especially in the era of social media, trolls will purposely interpret it as you. You know, it's always the same accusation, like, why are you rubbing it in our face? It's just
Yeah.
like, sir, I'm just walking down the street to get deli meats from the grocery store. Okay,
Yeah.
I ran out of milk. I'm not doing anything else besides that. The counterpoint to that is that simply being queer and living your life as a queer person is an act of political resistance, by the simple fact that you just kind of look and exist kind of differently, even if it's not necessarily your intention. It's just sort of almost implicit
Yeah.
in the reality of where we are.
Yeah, on one hand, like, yes, it's that weird like thing where it's like, my life is not a political statement, and yet living my life is a political statement because there are people who think my life is a political statement, right? Like, it's Trixie Mattel famously said, "Being gay isn't hard. Straight people make being gay hard," and you know, that's it right there,
That's
right?
it.
Like,
One thing that Trixie also said was, one of the things that women really understand is that if you love something, you have to support it. And
Yes.
I think even we see that in the TV show with Rose and Svetlana, but even with the books and the show itself, is that women will show up for the things that they love and support it. Women will use their purchasing power to support things that they love, and again recognizing that if there's something that you love, you have to support it. And again, I know some gay men don't necessarily know how to feel about the fact that something that is gay and queer about men being with men, men having sex with men, et cetera, um, how they necessarily feel about the way in which it can be sort of housed in this sort of straight, sort of female space mindset, and so on and so forth. And usually, sort of my response to that is, well, gay men have been writing books and making movies and TV shows. Are gay men showing up to support it? Right? So if queer people are making entertainment or art, and queer people aren't showing up to support it and not spending money to support it, whether it's at like a bar for like a drag show, whether it's a TV show, a movie, if people aren't showing their support, and here I'm gonna critique gay men in particular. If gay men aren't spending money to support gay art and gay things, and women are, then that's something that I think gay men have to kind of work through, right? Because I feel like sometimes with gay men, they're just assumed that it's going to continue to exist. But again, I think one of the things that women know is, as I said, if you love something, you have to support it. You have to put your money there. You have to put your time and attention
And it's
there.
always a
I'm
constant fight. There is no, okay, well, that issue is over now. We've solved homophobia. Let's move on and just live our lives. That's not a thing.
Well, very much so. But it's also just like, if Heated Rivalry wasn't written by a woman, and if it didn't have a large female fan base to begin with, that I think played a really big role on social media in popularizing the show, talking about the show, and so on and so forth, would it be the hit that it is today? Would gay men have shown up
Yeah.
for the show? Because even now, I mean, besides Nick, and I would say, most of my gay male friends, some have not watched the show, some have feel very tepid about it, some don't really like it, and some are like, yeah, I liked it and it was fine, but they they haven't joined the cult mentality that at least I have. I don't think you're quite a loon. I think you're a fan of the show. I think for me, and like there's a handful of gay men that really, really love the show. I mean, again, so much of what I've talked about has revolved around this freaking show. Um, but it's really interesting to see why that is. And I don't necessarily fully buy this idea of it not speaking to gay men, because I don't see how, because I don't want to say accusations, but one of the things that has come up is like, well, it doesn't feel like it's for gay men. It doesn't reflect. Again, it's this idea of like it doesn't reflect my reality. It's just like, well, what is your reality? Like
Yeah.
you've never hooked up with people in hotel rooms. Um, you've never had like a secret romance with someone who's on the DL. You've never been in the closet.
You've
And
never
again,
fallen further
one
wrong
of the
person for whatever reason is unavailable or off limits. Like that's who hasn't
exactly.
had a crush on
You never had a
you know
sugar daddy, honey, that wanted to keep you nice things? A lot of the
I
gays
haven't,
have. They've
but
had someone. I mean, me neither. But I mean, and even with like a lot of gay men, and this is something that appeared in the survey, is that a lot of gay men seem to like Scott and Kip's storyline more because they felt it was more oddly like realistic. But I think, as they're like, well, Shane and Ilya, like, I just can't identify with it. I think that's a lie. I think a lot of gay men can over identify with Shane and Ilya's story. I think Shane and Ilya's story is something that is too familiar for a lot of gay men. Yearning, how often is it that you meet someone for like a hookup and you hope that, they might become your boyfriend, or you'll meet up again, or you have like a friend with benefits that, you hope will turn into something more. I actually think Shane and Ilya's story hits too close to home for a lot of gay men, and that's why they don't like it or they have an aversion to it versus Scott and Kip. Even though Scott and Kip's story I think is a lot less realistic with, the sugar
right.
daddy. And I don't want to reduce the story to like a sugar daddy
Yeah,
narrative,
yeah. I
but
wouldn't
I think
because
that
again, coming as a book reader, that's just like the opposite of what their dynamic was. But I don't know.
okay, like a wealthy individual where you have like a meet cute who can offer you access
Right.
to a space that is outside of your own sort of like making. Um, but it's interesting how a lot of gay men seem to like that storyline more so. And it's oftentimes housed in this space of like it's more realistic, or again it's more healthy. Or I can identify with Shane and Ilya, but I think that's the opposite. I think that Shane and Ilya's story is just too familiar to a lot of gay men. It's too painful to sort of see, the unrequited love, the fear of saying I like you, I want to date you, I want to be with you, the rejection, the reality of sort of like the crushingness of the closet, of having to hide, of having to have like DL fun, along the way. That's at least my working theory.
Yeah, I mean, I think one. I mean, I think there could be probably something to that for sure. Um, but there's also this sense that I get in the queer community where things, I think, like we're so accustomed to being not in the center and marginalized that we sort of always feel marginalized, even our own spaces. So I don't know if you've like had this, experience on the apps or whatever, but this has certainly been my experience. Is like I am a pretty friendly person. I will, converse with pretty much anybody who reaches out to me.
Hey, buddy, you
And
looking? It's just like, yeah, I'm having
I
a good day. Read any good books lately?
looking for a good book. What about you? No, nothing,
Mm,
nothing quite that cringe.
looking for a
But
good story.
um, everybody complains about the apps because they feel that everybody is looking for the opposite of what they're looking for. And so it's like
Hmm.
people who want hookups say, "Oh, everyone just wants a relationship, like, or just wants to chat. Like, no one actually wants to hook up." People who are looking for a
Oh, okay.
relationship are like, "Oh, everybody just wants to hook up." People who are, hairy are like, "Oh, everybody just wants people with shaved chests." And people who are naturally smooth, like everybody just only wants bears, right? Like there's this sense in which sort of everybody feels marginalized within these very queer spaces, and I think it's sometimes because there is actually no center in those spaces,
Well,
and
and manipulation too.
sure, and maybe even
Like, girl,
maybe even algorithmic manipulation, right?
oh,
Um,
girl, I 100% believe that these applications lately, especially I've noticed in the last 4 to 5 months, with Grinder rolling out its $500 a month AI connecting feature or whatever, that the apps now are designed to connect you with people that you have nothing in common with, so that you can be like, oh, I have to spend $500 a month on this AI feature so that it can connect me with people that I want. I think that that's a part of it as well, but I don't have a massive like tech background to back all that up. But you're right, there has never really been a center, and it's always been sort of fluid. I just think that it's being exploited a lot more so now.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think that's true. But I guess bring that back to the show. I think it's just sort of like there's this built-in defensiveness in a lot of queer people, especially queer men, who are sort of like always like looking to feel marginalized in a sense. That fear of not being part of the group is like so deep within us, right? Which is like why we respond so much more extremely to negative comments than we do to positive comments. It's because we're like so highly sensitive to criticism. But yeah, I mean, I think that's all a part of this. But yeah, I mean, I would love for more gay men to support the things that they love, as you say. I have not encountered as many queer men as you have who haven't enjoyed the show.
Okay,
Um,
maybe I
for
just need better
my for,
friends.
for for my friends, it sort of there's like the obsessed side of the spectrum, and there's the oh yeah that was good side of the spectrum.
Hey,
Um, and I definitely have more friends that are on the obsessed side than on the that was okay side.
I mean, that's great. Like, I have friends who haven't watched the show at all. Um, and again, ones who just felt very tepid about it or didn't even really finish. I think for myself, because it captivated me, right from the get-go, right from the beginning, I was so compelled. And again, maybe it's also because I come from like a film studies background, and the more I like dive into it, the more I look into like the brilliance of like Jacob Tierney, Jackson Perrell, the entire team, and how well the show is constructed and thought out. Like, I have like a list of videos that I'm creating as I make my way through my reaction videos, and then people point things out or I catch things afterwards. Like in episode 4, after I talked a lot about like the opening montage, but then I realized I didn't talk about it enough. There's like so much in the montage that like I missed, and like I think part of it maybe for myself is not just the fact that it's a gay TV show, that it's spicy, that it's about the characters and romance, but maybe coming from a film studies background and someone who loves like textual analysis, like that's always been like my strength. I think the majority of my thesis is really just like literally reading, like spending 20 or 30 pages on like carefully analyzing every shot, the editing, just like reading to not the filth. What's the opposite? Reading to what's the opposite of filth? To glitz, to glam, reading to glam.
Reading to
Is that a
Glam, I
thing?
love that.
Did I just make up a new thing? Reading to glam? Oh my god, I'm gonna message RuPaul
Let's
and
make
be
it
like,
happen.
oh my god, reading to glam. This can be the name of our podcast. Reading to glam with Matt and Ange.
There we go.
That's what I'm gonna call this episode, Reading to Glam.
For sure.
But Reading to Glam, this show, because it is so well done, it's so accomplished, it's so detailed. I think that's something that I really enjoy. People who love the show don't just love it for Shane and Ilya and the spice and the romance. If you go on Reddit, if you go into the comments on my videos, other people who make videos, like they like the show because of how detailed it is, and people are
Yeah.
catching on to all of these details. Did you notice the edit over here? Did you notice this? Did you notice that? Full of all these Easter eggs, all of these, connections. Um, I think that's a big part of it as well, and maybe, I mean, we didn't necessarily talk about, but it's like the high level of thought and quality of the show itself, I think, is really, really, really important. From the way that Tierney uses like artwork to make statements about like the characters, the way again he uses mirrors, all of it. I think I said he took like 5 pennies and a goat and turned it into like a mansion made out of gold or something like that. Like he had no money really, but he created something that is so well done, and not just him, but like everybody worked together to create something that is so well done. Maybe your friends, they have a more of like a literary background, maybe that's also what they're catching on to. Maybe that's why there's such fans of the show. It's not just what you see there, but the recognition of like the high quality and thought that went into the show.
I mean, I think that's definitely there for sure. I think like for my friends, other than you, who are really into it, like there's a little bit of that analysis piece, but a lot of it was just like the memes that were coming out of it were so much fun. And so it's been a really fun fandom to
Yes.
be a part of because like the memes were so much fun. For me, it reminds me a little bit of like the heyday of Game of Thrones in that sense, where it's like the
Yeah.
conversation around the episodes was almost more interesting to me than the actual episodes. And yeah, or I mean, even like I think it's off right now, but even like last week, Heated Rivalry was like number 7 on Crave's most watched
At
thing.
one point, it was number 4. It was right after the CMAs, the Canadian Screen Awards, the
Okay.
CSAs. It
Yeah.
ended up at like number 3 or number 4, and I was gonna
Again.
screenshot
Yeah.
and be like, "We're at number 4 again," and it's
Yeah.
still in the top 10. So, and Forbes, a writer for Forbes magazine, had a really interesting article about how it's very rare that the show ended months ago, but the fandom is still going. And even
Yeah.
for myself, I know that I haven't hit the heyday with my conversations and like my analysis videos and reaction videos, like coming out like a lot later, after like the peak of the show.
Mhm.
But there's still thousands of viewers who are watching, and the subreddit is still growing and is still very active. It's crazy how the fandom has kept this show going, and I have to give credit to Jacob Tierney and all of the actors for being so active with the fandom, the red carpets, interviews. Maybe I should just reach out to Jacob Tierney's team and be like, listen, I need to talk to this guy. He's talking to everyone. Why can't he talk to me? They've kept it alive. And then the
Yeah.
book is coming out. They've started production. They're getting ready to go into production in August. The behind the scenes book, before you know it, it's going to be
Yeah.
April again.
Yeah. But I mean, I think another piece of this is it's not just that they've been accessible; it's just that they're really good, right? Like Preston
Yes.
Williams is always you tune in because you don't know what he's going to say next, right? The whole
Girl,
like
on the red carpet, he said whole.
yes.
What can we expect from season 2? He's like, whole. And Jacob Tierney turns around. He's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. But then so on the flip side, you have Rachel Reid and Jacob Tierney themselves, who are so articulate and intelligent about how they speak about it. Like, I am not deep in the weeds with media, and yet I have watched probably 20 or 30 interviews with these two
Yeah.
people, and they're always interesting, always insightful, always
Yes.
fascinating. But with like Jacob, especially, like it's it almost feels like a really good like sermon. Like you just want to go like testify, amen. Like like you never leave.
Testify, testify.
I never leave an interview with him not feeling inspired and excited and proud and so again, it's a really fun fandom to be a part of, and I don't think that can be um, overestimated as a part of the appeal, and maybe also why there is sort of this like two camps, of people who are like super super into it and people who aren't. Because if you're not engaging and if those memes aren't coming across your algorithm, if you're not seeking out this extra content, then yeah, maybe it is just well, yeah, that was fine. That was just a show, you know.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the fandom, and I know there's been conversation about like parasocial fandom, and I know that maybe some fans can take it too far, but that's with any show. And given I think how big the show is, I think that the parasocial fandom is very very minimal and is really kept under control by the overwhelming majority. And you're right. What has made this show so much fun to be a part of is the fandom. And again, even with the survey that I put out, I mean, the first survey that I put out had almost 600 respondents within a week. The second one not as much because I mean it's a second survey, even though the second one's obviously better, but I'm still trying my best to advertise it because I'm still trying to understand more about the fandom, and also the impact of the show on the fandom. But and I think that's what Jacob Tierney and Rachel Reid realize, and why they've been so active is they realize that it is the fan base that made the show what it is, and including social media, right? Like, I know Nick talked about it when we spoke last week. He said, like, social media, Instagram, that shower scene appearing everywhere. Their social media campaign when they were doing like podcasts, it was so adorable just seeing the two of them together. Like, I still go back to the early days of the show before they became these superstars, when they were doing that low budget, more indie stuff where it was just like Hudson and Connor, not on a red carpet, just kind of like talking, being themselves, kind of like being friends and adorable together. I really hope that they actually bring that back in season two. I hope that they don't switch gears. Um, Not that I have any experience in PR, but like I hope that they go back to maybe some of like the bookstores that they went to, some of the podcasts that they did, and I hope that they follow the success of the first season in terms of like just putting Hudson and Connor together and like reading cue cards and like letting them sort of like be themselves, watching them be like friendly and buddy with each other, doing behind the scenes sort of stuff instead of going like really big. I hope that they start small and build up to sort of like the big social media campaign, because I think it was a combination of them just doing things more independently that allowed the fan base to sort of like fan, appropriate, adopt, build, and go big as well. We've played such a big role in this, and it's a really fun space to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Well, friend, but I feel like we've hit a bit of a natural sort of end point here. Matt, thank you for being such a wonderful guest. So informative, so engaging, so knowledgeable. I would love to have you back here on as a guest again. Again, maybe we can do Reading to Glam. Maybe that's a whole separate podcast, Reading to Glam. This is every time you're here, we're going to read something to Glam. And again, we still have to talk about music. We haven't talked about music whatsoever at all. That's a whole separate topic that we'll get into. But again, can you remind everyone where they can find you if they would like to follow you?
Sure. So on Instagram, you can find me at Matt's Book a Day, and my blog is mattsbooksandmusic.ca.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for joining us here. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Matt will absolutely be back for another episode. And of course, I will be seeing him at some point for a pint at one of our favorite establishments. You can find me at Dr. T, the Gaymer PhD on YouTube. And on Instagram, you can find me at Angelo from the 416 underscore Dr. T Gaymer PhD on Spotify, on Amazon, on Apple. You can find me there at Dr. T the Gaymer and Film PhD. Until we meet again next time, don't just stay heated, make sure that you stay reheated. Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.